So another topic that I think most people heard of and is pretty cool is love language. And I think most people already took the test and heard of it, but if you haven't, there are 5 main love languages. Do you want to explain or?
The main types of love languages that people usually talk about are the acts of service, quality time, receiving gifts, words of affirmation, and physical touch. People recognize those things in a different way. So some people, they would prefer to spend quality time with a person that they really care about. Others think it's not enough to just spend some time together, and they prefer to receive material gifts. Or even like having reassurance by having physical touch, like a hug or a kiss or holding hands. Or others like acts of service, which is really helping the person in practical things and being there all the time to support you, even when you're doing a difficult task.
Especially when you're doing a difficult task.
Yes. And I think words of affirmation is something that is really big as well. Some people, they need to have this reassurance that their partner really cares about them and say, I love you, or I admire you, or I respect you. So do you want to talk about your love language?
Love language. So I took the test yesterday again, just to record this episode.
For this episode.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say I was surprised, but definitely changed a lot, because my ideal love language when I was young was very different from nowadays. And for me, the one that appeared the most was acts of service. And then words of affirmation, quality time, and gifts, they were all the same. And the least for me was physical touch. So what I understand by that is, now that I grew up and, okay, I'm not old, but I realize that there's things in life that is not that easy to do by myself. And if I have a partner, I really would appreciate if they took the time to do things for me that will help me in my practical life. Because one thing is like saying you love someone, saying they are your ideal type, blah, blah, blah. But if they don't do anything about it, that's not love, you know? Like, you can write me as much as you want to, but if you're not doing anything to show this affection in a practical way, it's like, okay, so love is a fantasy, and I don't want to live in a fantasy forever.
Totally agree. I think for me as well, the person gotta be reliable. You know, they gotta help me out. If I'm helping them, they gotta help me too. So the same goes for me. I think when I took the test a couple years ago, I think it was really different. I don't remember exactly the percentages, but it was different. And nowadays, the first one for me is also acts of service, which is really important, I think, you know, being there for the other person and going out your way to help someone you really care about. And in my case, the one that I got the least was receiving gifts. Was the weakest love language for me. Because maybe for me, I think doing things for me or other types of affection is more important than receiving gifts. But one thing that I would like to mention is that you said for you the least one was physical touch, right? And I think it's really important to say that maybe that's because we are living in Asia.
Yeah.
Perhaps if we were living in a different country, we wouldn't have physical touch as a love language that is so, not so important. Because here, people really don't like to show affection in public. So, as we said before, we are very self-aware, I would say, and we pay attention to our surroundings, and we learn by copying the locals, so to say. So we also don't feel comfortable with a lot of touch and hugs and all that. Maybe in another country we would. So how do you feel?
I think what is important to say is that in the test, they only talk about physical touch, like in public, like public display of affection. That's the type of physical touch the test is talking about. So, like my sister said, it depends on culture and where you're living. Because, well, I've never been a touchy person anyways. Like, I don't really like public display of affection. But I think it increased my dislike for that here. But I understand for couples sometimes it is important. Especially, I have friends who are in long distance relationships, and yeah, for them, for sure, physical touch would be an important thing because it's the missing point, right? But thinking about that as well, I thought maybe the core of a relationship will show itself when you're not with the person physically. Because if you think about when you meet the person you like, you go on a date, you do whatever you like, and it's a great time, you laugh, and you have the person by your side. But when you're apart, that's the moment the relationship gets tested. And it doesn't need to be long distance or anything. It's just like, will the person text you or say something meaningful or care about your day, care about your thoughts? Because when you're not close, the relationship is an idea, right? It's not manifested, it's not like embodied, sort of speak. So how the couples deal with distancing is also something really, really important, I feel.
Yes, and everything gets tested when people are away. The way they trust each other, the way they communicate with each other, what they share and what they don't share, all those things. And talking about the love languages, why do you think it's so important for people to be aware of their own love language and to recognize their partner's love language? Why do you think this is helpful?
I think it is extremely helpful because sometimes there are misunderstandings just because you don't know how the person likes to receive love. And because my love language is in a certain way, I tend to express my love in that way as well, because that's how I would like to receive. But maybe my partner doesn't recognize love like that. Maybe my partner needs physical touch. Maybe my partner needs quality time or whatever it is. So I think figuring out like the needs or how each other receive love or recognize love is crucial.
Yes, and I think what you mentioned is really important because if you don't want your partner to take the test, you can just observe them and recognize what they do for you. Usually it's their own love language. And sometimes you're getting frustrated because you're like, I don't want to receive gifts. I just want them to say to me that they care about me, you know? So maybe just observing, you're able to recognize what the other person needs. And also, if you know about love languages, it's something that you can openly talk about with your partner. And then you can openly know what ways you can really get this intimacy between you two in terms of love languages.
And also respect each other, because if you know your partner don't like one thing that you recognize as love, you should give it a break or like don't do it so often. So finding
especially
balance.
Physical touch, right?
Yeah. Because anything like consent is really, really important, even if it's for like really small things, because it's your personal space.